What's up, guys? Hope that my audio is coming in clear. Today, I want to talk about the awakening of consciousness of Black Americans. And this past week of September, today is September 14th. So, from September 7th to September 14th, and has been really eye-opening. I'm going to get deep in this video. I'm going to talk about history, a little bit about sociology, and why I think that the current time that we're living in is such an interesting time. But this week specifically is like the oven has been turned up a notch. And I want you to follow me on this. If you haven't already, hit the like button, and I'm going to bring you some context. So the background, if you're seeing this, says that the Clips were the first rappers to perform at the Vatican. I repeat, the Clips, a hip hop group from Virginia, is the first hip hop group to perform in front of the Vatican or at the Vatican. The Vatican is the center of the Catholic Empire and the Holy Roman Empire, and is historically significant to the Western world from the time of the Romans to present day. Okay, now this is very significant for multiple reasons, and I'm going to tell you why. But I'm also going to show you this. Okay, so yesterday we had Terrence Bud Crawford fight Canelo Alvarez. And in this fight, we have a Mexican national fighting against a black American. Terrence Crawford won the fight and became the first to win in this four belt era. Okay, now this is significant. Okay, I'm stay with me. So in order for me to talk about the great awakening that's taking place, I have to provide some historical context as to how did we get here. Not about boxing, not just about the clips performing at the Vatican, but this week of from September 7th through September 14th has been a very interesting week. So as we all know, uh political activist, speaker Charlie Kirk was unalived this week, okay, in Utah. All right. We have had a lot going on in the world currently. But why am I speaking about the awakening of Black Americans and the consciousness of Black Americans? Well, if you know the history, the Catholic Church, Pope Nicholas created a papal bull which stated that everything west of the Cape Verde and Azores Islands could be subjugated by the Catholic Church. So people of African descent as well as indigenous people were enslaved and sanctioned by the Catholic Church. Now, this is significant because later on, Bartholomew de las Casas is going to write a book and he's going to detail the atrocities that's taking place against the indigenous people of the Americas. And he argued that the Native Americans or the indigenous people should not be enslaved because they did not fight a war against the Catholic Church. So the original rule was that if the enemy fought against the crown, essentially, of the Catholic Church, the Pope, then they are eligible for subjugation. But the argument was that the Native Americans never fought a war against the Spaniards or the Portuguese. So why were they being enslaved? Now that's very significant. Okay. So prior to Christopher Columbus or Christopher Colon, they had a war in Spain, okay, called the Reconquista. So the Reconquista was the Christendom Spain fighting against the Moors and the Islamic forces that was controlling Spain. And once they successfully conquered the Moors, they began to kick out all of the undesirables out of Spain. So they passed an edict called the Alhambra Decree. So the Alhambra Decree was a law passed that basically said that if you were of Jewish faith, that you had to either leave Spain or you had to convert into the Christian faith, and then they were called conversos. So you have conversos, moriscos, and these are people that are trying to live in their homeland that had been their homeland after these religious wars had taken place. So that's a little bit of context. But let's get back to something that most people can relate to. Lately, with the advent of the internet, a lot of Black Americans have been researching their identity with tests like Ancestry, DNA testing, Ancestry.com, where we could look up documents, and with internet and as well as information being decentralized now, a lot of information that was once hidden to the public is now readily available with the click of a button. Now, ironically, when Black Americans who historically have been subjugated, mistreated, and also oppressed, not just economically, but also spiritually and educationally. In the United States, there were a history of centuries where Black Americans were not allowed to read, write, or even learn. It was illegal for Black Americans to even learn, you guys. Now, this was during slavery as well as after the enslavement period of the Black Americans. Now, I'm going to get a little deep, and this is not a hostile broadcast, by the way. I'm not uh in any way, shape, or form advocating hate or discrimination against anyone. Let me repeat, this is not a hostile broadcast, and I am not advocating hate or discrimination to anyone. I don't believe that anyone should be discriminated against on the basis of their country of origin, religion, ethnicity, gender, orientation, all of the above. Okay? I am simply providing context to what I see as a spiritual awakening of the Black Americans. Thank you. Now, if you haven't already, hit the like button and you can like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. And I don't think that you're going to get this type of content anywhere else because a lot of people don't see the world the way that I see the world. Well, okay, the Black Americans have been researching their identity. Now, if you talk to most Black Americans, and when I say Black Americans, I'm talking about the people that's not immigrants. I'm talking about the people who ancestors experienced slavery in the Americas. Now, this is very significant because in the Americas, we have multiple types of Black people. Okay. You have the Black people that experienced slavery over here. You have the Aboriginal or indigenous people who would be considered Black. Then we have people that have recently immigrated to the Americas from the Caribbean and or from Africa or even Europe for that matter that would be considered Black. So it's a distinction. I would also like to state that the people who would be considered white in America, because we play these color games, so you have people classified as Black, you have people classified as white in America due to the racial history. The people who are classified as white, many of them, or almost all of them, came to the United States within the last 120 years. Now, this is either true or it's false. Now, this is very significant. Most of the Europeans that's in this country are relatively new immigrants. Just like our President Donald Trump, his grandfather is from Germany. Now, this is very significant. I want you to stay with me. His grandfather is from Germany. His parents were immigrants. He's the grandchild of an immigrant. And I'm not saying that to disparage him, but what I'm saying is most of the people that are in the country are relatively new immigrants. The only people that are not new immigrants here are the Black Americans for the most part. Now, are there people here who can trace their ancestry back to 1776? Yes, but they're the minority. Most Europeans in this country can't do that. And most of the Caribbeans and Africans definitely can't do that because they wasn't allowed to come to the United States until the 1960s. Now, because prior to the civil rights movements, it was not that they had racial quotas where they didn't want the browning of the United States. So why am I talking about the Black American awakening? Well, when Black Americans ask questions after we were told that we couldn't go to school during the Black Codes, the Black Codes was the periods but after slavery. So after we got out of slavery in 1865 up until the Jim Crow era, we experienced about a 30, 40-year period called the Black Codes. You can research this. So the Black Codes was a period where even though Black Americans were free, they were severely subjugated so they could not go to school, they couldn't learn, they couldn't own property. It was so many different laws that were passed. Some laws that was even just like silly, like you couldn't look a white person in the eye. You, if you owned property, that was against the law. If you um had more money than a white person, that was against the law. Ironically, ac- according to the knowledge and the information that was here, the so-called Black Americans or the origins of Black Americans date back to the rise of Hispaniola, as well as from 1526. So when Hernan Cortez, who came a little bit after Christopher Columbus never came to the United States. Excuse me, I have a sore throat. He never came to the United States. He went to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So the origin of a Black American is a combination of indigenous blood, European blood, and African blood. That's what makes a Black American unique. Is that they are a combination of different ethnicities, and they went through ethnogenesis after being here, where they became a new group. Now this is nothing new, because if you look at people from Cuba, it would be easy for you to understand that the people of Cuba are a mix of the same thing: European blood, because they were conquered by the Spanish; African blood, because of the slave trade through Africa; and the indigenous people of Cuba. Same with Puerto Rico. However, when we talk about our identity in the United States, we're the only people that's not allowed to express ourselves with pride. So going back into the Vatican and the clips performing, the clips are from the state of Virginia. Virginia is a part of the original 13 colonies, you guys. Now you gotta stay with me. The clips are from Virginia. Virginia is one of the original 13 colonies. Okay. During be during the colonization of the Americas, first you had the Spanish and the Portuguese, and they got here because of the Pope. The Pope had supreme power at the time and was considered to be infallible. And Pope Nicholas created a papal bull. He created two famous papal bulls, one called Romanus Pontifex. Google it. Romanus Pontifex. And then this would later be in anglicized to call the doctrine of discovery. And they stated that everything west of the Cape Verde and Azores Islands, which is North America, South America, and the Caribbean, was free for them to colonize. So they have this book that I read called the Enslavement of the Native Americans, by Andres Resendez, who is a professor at the University of California. I did a lot of presentations on his book on my channel. Well, he traces that Native Americans, when they were being enslaved by the Spanish, that Native Americans would be shipped to Spain or España, and they three Native Americans sued to have their freedom. All right. This was in the 16th century. So going back to Hernan Cortez for a second. So Hernan Cortez conquered what would now be considered Mexico City in 1526. 1521 to 1526 is around the time that they considered the fall of the Aztec Empire and uh King Montezuma losing his throne to the Spaniards. according to their history, what the Europeans wrote.
is nothing that could be done that has not already been done to Black Americans. We already went through enslavement. We already went through discrimination. We already have been severely discriminated against. The only way we overcame that. So it's a great awakening. And guess what? They're telling us not to wake up, but to go back to sleep. We're the only people where they tell